In regards to your question about whether we can expect a lull, I don't think so. I think, we're going to see a lot of movement going forward here.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we're all just trying to survive in a rough world.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, where we keep our promise of inviting the best guests in all of true crime. And this episode, as you're about to see, is no exception. Now, it's been 2 months and 5 days since 4 young University of Idaho students were savagely murdered, stabbed to death in their off-campus home. Let us never forget those young lives lost way too soon. Madison Mogen, 21, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20. May their memories be a blessing. Police say they have their killer, who is 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger. We want to remind everyone, especially with a talented lawyer on the panel tonight, that Bryan Kohberger is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, our best guests break down the very latest. Tracy Walder, in the blue long-sleeve shirt, is one of the few women to serve in both the Directorate of Operations at the CIA and as a special agent at the FBI. From 2000 to 2004, she served the CIA's Counterterrorism Center Weapons of Mass Destruction Group, followed by the FBI's Chinese Counterintelligence team. She now works as an author and adjunct professor of criminal justice at Texas Christian University and sits on the board of directors of Girl Security. She is the author of The Unexpected Spy. And then we've got a first-time guest. Tara Malik is an Idaho licensed attorney practicing in state and federal court in business and commercial litigation. Tara has experience in both civil and criminal law. Previously, she worked as a Kootenai County deputy prosecutor, a special assistant United States attorney, and an assistant United States attorney at the United States Attorney's Office in Boise, and is now the chief litigator at Smith and Malik, as well as co-owner. She went to the University of Arizona, where I met my sweet wife, and she moved to Idaho in 2008, where she attended, you guessed it, the University of Idaho Law School. Thanks to both of you. Quick programming note, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, we're at Podcast STS. Please support us on Patreon. You can listen to us anywhere podcasts are found. And as my 8-year-old daughter says, please hit that subscribe button and the like button. It gets the algorithm chugging. On to the latest news now. Bryan Kohberger was in court in Latah County Thursday for a status conference. Kootenai County Public Defender Ann Taylor basically said that they're going to challenge the evidence and needed more time. A hearing is now scheduled for almost 6 months from now, June 26th, which coincidentally is the 41st anniversary of my bar mitzvah. Tara, did anything surprise you about this?
No, nothing really surprised me about the hearing that occurred yesterday. He had the right to waive what's called his preliminary hearing, the hearing that's now been set in June. Normally, those preliminary hearings are set within 14 days, but a defendant does have the right to waive that speedy trial right, push that out, which they did in this case. Unsurprising, given the volume of evidence we're dealing with here. And the information as well. So I believe that Ann Taylor had predicted the hearing could be as long as 5 to 6 days starting on that June date.
Yeah, the public defender representing Bryan Kohberger basically requested the judge to allow for 4 to 5 days. Tracy, I know your background is more in counterterrorism and you're FBI special agent, but you've been around court hearings enough. This was under 5 minutes. It was, in terms of media interest, less than dazzling, kind of routine, right?
Yes. I mean, to Tara's point, I think there was nothing exceptional, I guess, about anything. I fully expected it. I think people are frustrated, right, that it's been, pushed out an additional 6 months. But to Tara's point, the amount of evidence that they had, I mean, I think the bottom line is you want this to be a conviction, right? And you want this to be done properly. And so I think nothing about this is surprising, at least to me, in any way, shape, or form.
There has not been a plea yet. He obviously faces, Bryan Kohberger, first-degree murder and burglary charges. Someone tweeted me about these burglary charges, and to be perfectly honest, it was an interesting tweet, and for the life of me, I can't remember exactly the point of the tweet. But I'm curious to you, Tara, the the purpose of these add-on charges. Is there one?
Well, when the law enforcement is looking at what they've got and what they're working with, they're going to charge everything that they believe is significant and that can be charged in this type of case. Burglary is, the unlawful entering into a residence or dwelling or building with the intent to take something or commit some sort of crime. And so it's unsurprising to me that there's a burglary charge attached here as well. Obviously, each felony charge has its own separate penalties and maximum and minimum penalties. And so, there is a potential where you can stack charges and you can stack the maximum penalties and have those sentences run consecutively. But in a case where you're dealing with murder, your maximum is up to life in prison.
There is obviously still no bond. Either the judge ordering Kohberger to remain remanded in state custody. He's staying in a little cell right in the basement of the county courthouse. Tara, I assume you've been to that court since you went to the University of Idaho, and it's probably steps away. Can you just describe how, from what we're hearing, it's a very tiny courtroom, a very tiny little county jail. Can you describe it a little bit?
Sure, and you're testing my memory here on that one, but it's a small facility. It's been around for a long time, so it is, when you compare it, especially to some of the other courthouses around the state, or in Boise or some of the federal courthouses, you're talking about a pretty cramped location, especially for this type of case.
And again, counselor, to you, if you had if you were betting on this, would you bet that there will be a trial, that Bryan Kohberger will want to face a jury of his peers, and have the judicial system play out, or do you think he could plead guilty and there's no trial and he's sentenced according to some kind of agreement between the public defender and the state?
Well, we're a little bit at a disadvantage when we're speculating about what he may or may not do, because we're not privy to the same information that, for instance, the prosecutor and the defense attorney have. And so each side is going to really sit there and weigh the strengths and weaknesses of their side and their case before making that decision. The decision to go to trial in any case is a bit of a weighing analysis or contest about what your risk is in moving forward here. What we've heard so far from his defense attorney is that they will be moving forward to this preliminary hearing. I anticipate that they will have some hard questions and some cross-examination questions perhaps as well in regards to some of this evidence that we've been made aware of.
And Tracy, I promise we're coming to you. But just looking ahead to this hearing that's now scheduled for June 26th, Tara, can you kind of just walk us through a little bit about what we can expect? Is this going to be like a mini trial of what is to come?
Yes. So the short answer is yes, it is a mini trial. So the preliminary hearing stage, once you're charged with a felony, you go to preliminary hearing. Preliminary hearing can be waived, but it's an opportunity and it's a requirement for the state to put on evidence to demonstrate on a more likely than not basis that a crime occurred and that it was this individual who's sitting in that courtroom that day that committed the crime. So it's certainly not the same standard as when you're going all the way through to a trial and a conviction at a trial, but it is the first hurdle for the state to gather enough evidence to convince a judge to what's called bind the matter over to district court. If they succeed in showing on a more likely than not basis that a crime occurred and that it was indeed the defendant who committed that crime, then the matter moves forward to district court. At the district court level, he'll enter a plea, and then the parties will start exchanging additional discovery, and they'll move forward in preparation for trial.
Very, very well laid out there. Tracy, so I'm a media guy, come from the news world, and we're always looking for some angle. As I said, the hearing today, or yesterday, I should say, was less than impressive from a media standpoint, creating a narrative or a story out of it, because it was very status quo. But the media always finds something, and they focused in on, of all things, Bryan Kohberger's face. He appeared to have some cuts on there. And ace reporter Brian Enton, who is a friend, he tweeted out that he didn't notice it while he was sitting in the courtroom. However, he was able to zoom in, as everyone else was, after the hearing, and you could see what appeared to be nicks on his face. Now, for full disclosure, I had lunch with our producer, Steve Cohen, today, who also had nicks on his face. Calling you out, Steve Cohen, from shaving. You see things through a different lens. He's obviously a very high-profile inmate. He came in, I know he had for lack of a better or official term, the suicide vest on. What did you make of that? And what kind of security and attention, are even in this small jail, are they paying to this high-profile suspect?
So just to kind of clarify something, he didn't have a suicide vest on. He had basically a flak jacket, a bulletproof vest. And that is because, and I think Tara can attest to this, the prison system, the Bureau of Prisons, has to keep prisoners safe. That's their job. And it is your right as a prisoner to have some degree of safety. And so I know we've seen pictures of him getting in and out of vehicles with helmets on, flak jackets, those kinds of things. And that is so, someone doesn't take, a long range rifle shot to him. They have to keep him reasonably safe. In terms of him having access to razors and those kinds of things, all of those are what we call jail safe, right? I've been in prisons overseas. I've been in federal prisons, county jails. Those are all, they have access to razors, rubber pens, rubber pencils. All of those are to accommodate them not being able to either kill themselves or kill someone else. And so him having access to that, it doesn't necessarily surprise me. It's actually pretty typical. Prisoners have a right to all of that. And what Tara was saying before, this is a very small jail, basically. And there is a big difference between jail and prison, and that's where he's being held, until he's sentenced. Typically, you don't spend longer than a year there. And so they are not used to, in this particular jail, probably having prisoners of this level of danger, I guess. And so I think that they are doing everything that they possibly can to keep him safe and meet his needs. I know there was a lot of discussion too about him having access to his vegetarian diet, which I know that's frustrating, to a lot of us, because we feel that, he should pay for what he did. But again, he hasn't been tried or convicted of any of these crimes. And for religious purposes or dietary purposes, those needs, have to be met in a reasonable way, of course. And, Brian Enton is amazing. And I think he was able to find out that those were from shaving. And quite frankly, I bet you it's probably difficult for Kohberger to use the razor that they're giving him. It's not the typical razor that you or someone else would be using. And that's probably why he nicked himself.
You're not getting the Gillette Mach 3 the fusion in that jail. Do you think they have eyes on him 24/7 in that cell, either via camera or a physical person who's just watching him?
Obviously, I'm just hypothesizing here. I would think in a case of this nature, there's two reasons why they would want to have eyes on him all of the time. One is obviously they don't want him to escape. I think that's a reason we all think of. But then another reason is they don't want him to harm himself, right? Because then that comes back on the jail and on the county. So I believe that they have either physical eyes on him or some kind of a CCTV sort of situation, but I've never been in that particular jail before, so maybe Tara can speak more to how that would work there.
Tara, do you happen to know, now that we're beating you with a curveball here?
Yeah, no
you-
kidding.
yeah. Do
I'm
you know, do they
sorry.
have a camera
No.
on him?
I don't know for sure. I would say that my experience, when I worked as a prosecutor and I did some work in the civil rights realms and excessive force realm, my experience has been in the jails that I had visited, there were cameras and they were in locations where there were prisoners. And so for safety reasons, for a number of different reasons. So I would suspect that there's also some sort of CCTV system, like Tracy mentioned, in this jail as well. And certainly with this high profile of a case, normally what happens is there are some additional steps and security measures that are put in place, both for the prisoner as well as, for everybody else.
I'm just thinking of like the poor fool who gets like a drunk and disorderly, cited for that and is thrown into the jail and is now in a cell next to Bryan Kohberger. That
I would imagine they're isolating him. Just like Tara was saying, there are additional measures that they're going to put into place. They're not going to put, someone who belongs in the drunk tank, next to Kohberger's cell.
That's good to know for whoever that poor drunk person was. So we are getting some other news, and this is sort of interesting from a human interest standpoint, and that is we're hearing more and more from people who interacted with the suspect either before, but mainly after the killings. CBS News exclusively spoke to Bryan Kohberger's neighbor in Pullman, Washington, and she didn't want to be identified. We know it's a she. But according to her, Kohberger asked, I'm sorry, it was a male. So Kohberger asked him about the killings days after they occurred, allegedly saying, and this is Kohberger speaking now, and I'm quoting, "Yeah, seems like they have no leads. Seems like it was a crime of passion." The neighbor asked not to be identified. Tracy, I think this is a little more in your wheelhouse. When you hear he's discussing a crime that he's accused of committing and talking about it, as though he's got some inside information, the fact that there's no leads, but then goes on to say it's a crime of passion. Does this give us any insight? Because obviously the remaining question, the biggest question is why, right? Does this give us any insight into motive?
You're probably going to be mad at me for this answer, just being the practical, logical, evidence-based person.
Not at all.
Not, in my opinion, no. And the reason is I even suspected that this was a crime of passion, right? And I'm certainly not a killer. I think based on just you had the coroner's report that did come out, right, talking about the violent way in which they were killed, the type of knife that was used. This is a big knife. This is not, some small. And, we know this was done really quickly. I think all of those things speak to, just common sense wise, this perhaps being a crime of passion. Now, yes, the biggest thing that was missing from that probable cause affidavit was definitely the why. And I'm not sure that we're ever going to get the why, but it speaks to motive. Look, I personally have always felt that he perhaps made casual contact with someone who is in the house, made more out of that contact, and then, basically started stalking them and then came in for the kill. So, do I believe that this was a crime of passion? Perhaps, but not in the sense that we think of, lovers, quarrels, and things like that. And so, yes and no. And I'm sorry for the ambiguous.
No, well, do you have more thoughts on that? Because now I'm hearing more about a thrill kill. I've heard so many things, and I'm not a profiler or a psychologist. I hear people saying that he would have potentially become a serial killer, thrill kill. Are you breaking it down any further from what you know, or it's too early to say?
Look, I'm obviously not a profiler. I'm not going to pretend that I am. Personally, again, all my hypothesis, I do feel that this was probably a budding serial killer situation that we're looking at. And the reason I think that is because if you look at the research project that he did, I think that that showed up on Reddit shortly after he was arrested. So my students in my criminal justice classes, they all have to do something like that, a research. But it's all sanctioned by the school and the review boards. And the questions that he had, in my opinion, speak to someone who was curious about what it felt like to kill someone. Just, kind of getting in his mind, and just some more of the things that we're seeing of his writings and people that have come into contact with him. So, I think that this probably was a situation where if he wasn't caught, I do feel that he would have killed again. My gut says this is probably his first time.
Another interesting piece of small news, which could be viewed as rather large from a profiler, I suppose. And Tara, this is not a legal question, but just a human question. A news outlet reported that in his transport back from Pennsylvania to Idaho, he was speaking with some law enforcement officials, and those officials spoke off the record saying that he said to them, and this is a paraphrase for the most part, it's really sad. This is Kohberger about the crimes. It's really sad what happened to them. You went to the University of Idaho. These are young kids in their 20s, early 20s, assuming he committed the crime. Like, how disassociated and eerie is it that he would say that?
No, it is an extremely sad situation. And if he did commit these crimes, and obviously he's innocent until proven guilty, I think that is an alarming and really shocking statement to make. And certainly that type of statement would be something that I would expect if he is found guilty for the crimes, that the prosecution may try and bring into the sentencing hearing if it gets that far, to talk about just his state of mind, or whether he was remorseful, or all of those factors that a judge is going to really consider when determining what the appropriate sentence is here. But it is, if he did in fact commit these crimes and made that type of statement, certainly very disturbing on a very human level.
So another piece of information that a lot of people are still talking about, and we talked about it last night, but I'm curious to get both of your takes on this, is this sealed warrant. Authorities temporarily sealed a search warrant for Kohberger's the Pullman, Washington apartment. They say that releasing details could prematurely end the investigation and create a threat to public safety. Tracy, I'm wondering if you followed that, and what you made of that.
So I saw pieces of that. I don't know that I've necessarily seen something like that before. I think in terms of a threat to public safety, what I'm wondering is, my guess is it's probably more digital evidence and things of that nature, as well as weapons and things like that in his home. I also think, I think Tara might be able to speak more to this. I wonder how much this has to do with the gag order that's also in place, that they don't want some of that information out there. So I wonder if that's also part of why they sealed it. And then I also wonder, too, if that makes things even more difficult in terms of getting an unbiased jury and an unbiased jury pool as well, having all of that out there. And so I'm more actually thinking about it from a legal perspective than sort of that public safety threat perspective, because then ultimately that might set him free. And then we now have a potential or alleged killer on the loose.
So Tara, do you think it's a legal issue?
I think all of the concerns that Tracy just raised are really valid points. And I think that both sides are going to be exceptionally careful not to violate this court's gag order. And certainly taking steps to seal that information right now is one of the safest ways to make sure that information that shouldn't be out there is not getting out into this public realm. The other issue that Tracy raised, which is absolutely on point, is this is a very highly public and publicized case. And, Idaho is not a huge population state. And so one of the concerns I'm sure that everyone has in their mind is, what's the appropriate venue here, and whether one or both sides is going to, and mostly the defense, whether they're going to move to change venue from Moscow, from Latah County, somewhere else because of the publicity that it's receiving. So I think all of those things were probably factors that were considered when they went to seal that information.
And what does your legal gut tell you? Will there be a change of venue or no?
I don't know for sure. My gut instinct would be that yes, we can expect some sort of motion to change venue here.
So back to the sealed warrant for a second, and then we'll move on. People kind of raise the flag about curious language again, and I'm quoting here in this, the language about the sealed warrant. Authorities talk about the threat to public safety, the threat to the privacy of witnesses, victims, and victim families' names in the affidavit. Does that anything there jump out at you, Tara, as an attorney?
Well, whenever you have a large-scale case or investigation, that does include the use of a lot of witnesses to kind of piece together what happened, like you have in this case. Law enforcement does, and maybe I'm stepping into Tracy's realm a little bit here too, but I think we all want to be really cognizant of protecting the privacy rights of those individuals, especially when you know that there is such a spotlight on this case and that there is such an interest, not only, within Moscow, but also nationally. Certainly, having witnesses approached by individuals or individuals in the media would cause some consternation and distress to certain people. And I think, again, it's another step to try and really make sure that both sides are taking appropriate actions in this case and really giving the case a chance and giving each side a chance to present it in a court of law and honoring really the identities of those individuals that may be involved, and that wasn't their choice to be involved. So they just happened to be there at whatever particular time and have some sort of information.
And Tara, for those of you who are watching, came on last minute. We've been trying to get her, and I'm about to overwhelm her, which I shouldn't do, but I'm going to go right back to you with there is an attorney in Glendale, California named Lara Uretzian, and she has represented clients, infamous clients. The first one is infamous, Scott Peterson. The second one, some people say he is infamous, is Michael Jackson. Others will send me hate email for me saying that. But she weighed in on this affidavit, the probable cause affidavit. She was asked by Fox News Digital about it, and she said, and I'm quoting here, "In this case, what I've noticed is they've got evidence and they've tried to put together the pieces of the puzzle, but each and every one of the pieces of the puzzle seem to have issues and weaknesses and places where a defense attorney can poke holes." So Tara, to you, is this kind of like SOP, standard operating procedure, where an attorney sees a probable cause affidavit and immediately is finding gaps in places that they, as she says, can poke holes?
I think a defense attorney's job is to look for those types of gaps in there. And no case is perfect. And certainly, I've yet to see one in my career that's perfect for either side. And so there are always some issues or some gaps in the information that we have. I think that her statement that there's issues with each one of the pieces of the probable cause affidavit really is going to be something that the defense is going to hyper focus on here. Now, we also don't have the full story and the full evidence. So even though there may be some question here in certain bits and pieces, we also can't look at evidence just in a vacuum. And so there's certainly a lot of weight when you put bits and pieces together and you look at the evidence cumulatively and outside of the vacuum and look at a bigger picture that seems more persuasive. And again, you're not trying to prove your case, beyond a reasonable doubt in a probable cause affidavit. You're just looking for probable cause at that point in time.
And Tracy, to you, this attorney went on and said that reliance on cell site data could be a flaw if prosecutors don't have something more tangible than that cell site data linking the suspect to the crime. We know about this touch DNA, but some people don't think that is enough. She goes on to say, speaking about the cell site data, to me, that's never enough because you could be 10 to 15 miles away, depending on the radius it covers, and goes on to note that his apartment is just 10 miles away from that 6-bedroom rental home on King Road. So does she make a good point in your opinion that you can't just rely on the cell phone data? There's got to be other much more tangible evidence to link into the crime?
Look, it hurts my FBI heart to say this, but yeah, I mean, that's the bottom line there is that this CAST system, or the system that they use to get a lot of the cell phone data, is actually pretty new. And there's, I don't want to say questions, but when it's been used in court before, it's been seen as kind of like widely circumstantial, right? Because you don't have the person sitting there with the phone. You can always make the case that it could be someone else with the phone, right? Or someone else within the vicinity. So she's not necessarily wrong. That is her job, right? To put poke holes in it. I think you can also poke holes in that touch DNA that was found on the knife sheath too. I know it seems like you can't, but you can. I mean, that's our job too in the FBI, or really in law enforcement, is to think about those things. What will they be able to sort of poke holes in? So I think that in terms of using that cell phone, that system is new, and there have been questions about its admissibility in court. I do think, though, I mean, I will never forget as an FBI agent, even though I was assigned to the counterintelligence squad, I worked at an RA, or a small resident agency. And so we did a lot of other stuff too. And I was, this was a bank robbery. I went to testify in front of the grand jury once for it to get an indictment. And I mean, we had the suspect on the camera, his fingerprints on the gun, the money that was registered. And I remember my boss telling me, if you don't get an indictment, don't bother coming back. And they were like genuinely concerned whether or not like we would get an indictment for that. So I have a really hard time believing that law enforcement is hanging their case like just on cell phone data from a capture system that has been questioned before in court. And like Tara was saying, we don't have all of the evidence. This is just the amount of evidence that they needed to go and arrest him. They're not going to show you all of their cars. They're just going to give you the bare minimum to get that warrant. So I'm not too concerned.
So students returned just a couple of days ago on Wednesday. Tara, I'm curious, I know you're a bit older, but do you know people still in Moscow? And have you heard anything about, what it's been like to return to campus?
I do still have friends in the area, and the university is a wonderful university. It's a very tight-knit, small community. Lots of friends and neighbors often helping each other. They've got a wonderful farmers market that happens in the summertime every Saturday. Everyone comes out. I remember I used to go to it. It's a really tight-knit community, and this has certainly rocked that community. I think just as a general statement, anytime there's an arrest in a case like this, it seems that the public kind of breathes a little bit a sigh of relief that there is some sort of answer here. And I know they're going to be watching this closely to see how it plays out. But certainly the news of an arrest in the case was very welcome.
So not only do we deliver the best guests in true crime, as you're seeing right now before your very own eyes, but we've got the best audience in STS Nation. And we've got a bunch of comments and questions, if you will indulge us for a little bit here. The first one comes from Marianne, and she writes, and Tara, I think this is more up your alley, but plenty for Tracy to weigh in on here too. I think so much more will come out if there is a trial, which so far shows that there will be one. I feel for the parents of victims. No one wants to hear the brutality that happened to the young people. I also feel for the two other young people living in the home and how close they too could have been to losing their own lives. So Tara, to you, I mean, a trial, and I know Steve Goncalves, the Goncalves family, already said it would be difficult for them to attend certain days. Maddy Mogen's father appeared on Good Morning America the other day and said he hasn't even been able to read the entire probable cause affidavit because it would be too difficult for him. How hard is it on families if they have to sit through this trial and listen to the gory details of how their young children were brutally murdered? I know I couldn't do it.
Oh, it's extremely hard. I think that anytime you have a crime of violence, it is really hard for affected family members to sit and hear the details of that. And, the state has a very high burden in a trial. And so they're going to have to put on everything they have in order to convince a jury that this is the individual who committed this crime. And so I really do feel for, the victim's family in this case. And certainly it sounds like they have some great community support, and there are support services, victim advocates in the judicial system as well. And the prosecutor's offices usually do have a victim's advocate who will help and kind of sit with the family, coordinate the times when they have to be in the courtroom, when they're not in the courtroom. But it's not an easy process if you're affected or if you have a loved one that was affected in a crime like this.
The good or bad part about reading questions is then I start to think of my own, and I have one for you, Tara. Is there any chance that the public defender, assuming she is still representing Bryan Kohberger when this trial starts, if it does start, is there any chance she would ever let him testify? Would you ever allow that to happen? I mean, if he wanted to, you'd have to let him, right? But not a great idea.
It depends on the case, and I was not a defense attorney ever, so I'm talking a little bit out of turn here, but it's going to be a call that they're going to have to make. And what I do know and I can tell you is anytime you have someone who's accused of a crime go up and testify, there's a potential risk there of what happens and whether it backfires. Once you get up on the stand to testify in a case, you're obviously opening yourself up to cross-examination by the opposing attorney. And so it's not just a question of going up and explaining, your side of the story. You also have to think about, okay, what is this cross-examination going to look like, and how and can we rebut, whatever comes out on cross-examination?
Tracy, this one's from you, from Marietta. Even if it was only touch DNA found on the sheath, how does he explain his behavior? There's a U in behavior, and Tara, I read you're from England, and this person is likely from the UK. So how does he explain his behavior leading up to the crime? For example, 12 visits to the area where the crime was committed, and his behavior after the crime, especially while he was being surveilled by the FBI. Any touch DNA evidence may not be enough on its own, but there does seem to be a lot of circumstantial evidence here. I pray justice is served in this case. So to you, Tracy, people have said touch DNA might not be enough, but what about all these other things?
Well, that's the point, right, of the probable cause affidavit, is to put all of these pieces together, right? That's why you don't want to just rely on the cell phone data. That's why you don't want to just rely on the touch DNA. That's why you don't want to just rely on, what witnesses have said his behavior was like, cleaning his car at 4 a.m. with gloves on, putting his trash in. All of those things go together to present the case. I think, in terms of the knife sheath, again, I have no idea, but I think, the defense attorney would say, oh, well, someone may have just picked it up and left it there and it was his, right? There's so many. That's why you don't want to ever rely on one single piece of evidence for this case. I think that they personally have a great case. But again, I'm not a defense attorney. I've never worked for that side before. So I am sure that they are already poking holes in some of these things.
Next one comes from Chuck Miller, and this is in response the first day back at school on Wednesday, a bunch of students talked about how they had a collective sigh of relief, but others said, this is a scar that's going to last maybe forever. And Chuck Miller writes, the community trauma never goes away. My wife was a Florida State student, and I was living on Pensacola Street when Ted Bundy committed the murders in Tallahassee. She talks about it to this day. Tara, to you, I mean, again, just from a human standpoint, you went to law school there. This is going to be difficult for the university to overcome in terms of the emotional damage. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think that the university has done a really nice job of communicating with the community, with the students to the extent that it can, providing accommodations and doing what is in its control and power really to, make students try and feel safe again. Obviously an tragic and unfortunate circumstance. But I think that, of course, in any community where you have a significant event like this, it's going to be in people's memories for a while. The benefit, I think, for this particular community is that it is so supportive of those students, and it's so supportive of each other, those community members, that, they're going to have to rely on each other pretty hard coming up here, but to have that sort of warm community and environment, I think will be helpful in the healing process.
Next question comes from artist Brindle. Awesome episode. Thank you. I'm wondering, since we don't really know what kind of trauma DM, that is the surviving roommate, Tracy, since we don't know what kind of trauma DM was subjected to or what threat might have been made, is it possible that Kohberger returned to the scene to see if she had called 911? It also occurred to me that DM and the rest of the roommates might have charged their phones in one of the common areas and didn't have it with her in her room. That could go far in explaining the delay, since she might have been scared out of her mind. Before you answer that, Tracy, as we all know, the internet can be a very rough place, and already, people are ganging up on this surviving roommate saying, she didn't act correctly. And on my show, since I host it and I'm not burdened by a big network, I want to tell those people to buzz right off. We need to be sympathetic and empathetic, and we have no idea how we would react in these situations. But from a I guess just a standpoint of, mystery, do you think that there is a possibility that he came back because they, in essence, crossed paths? Although we don't know if he saw her, we just know at this point that she saw him.
So first of all, thank you for not allowing people to vilify her. No one is judging her harder than she's probably judging herself right now. And every single network I've been on, I've been extremely careful never to put her down. We have absolutely no idea what we would do in a situation like that. And I think people forgot that they were probably 20 at one point, college students and what they would do. So I've looked at the floor plan of the house quite a bit. It's been, online. From my perspective, I'm not sure that he saw her. I think the way she was able to crack her door, she could see him. I think that he was in such a blind kind of rage-like state that he was focused on one thing, which in my opinion was getting out as quickly as possible. I'm not sure that he expected as many people to be there as were there. So I personally do not think that he saw her. So I do not think that he made an attempt to go back to the house. And in fact, I believe it was reported in the probable cause affidavit, I could be incorrect, that there was the white Hyundai was seen moving away at a high rate of speed. So that indicates to me that he was trying to, get the heck out of Dodge very quickly, not come back. I have stated before that I thought that they were probably charging their phones in a different place, or their phones were probably out of juice. I teach college students now, and the amount of them that do not have their phones charged on a daily basis is quite astronomical. And again, I think we forget what we would do in situations like these. So she very well may not have had it on her, or it was dead. So I really appreciate that question, but I don't think he came back just because of what was reported about the Elantra.
Add my wife to the people who have a low battery juice. I can never reach her. And that's probably no coincidence. But Tracy, back to you for a quick second. You don't think he saw her. If he did see her, do you think she could have potentially been the fifth victim?
It's a hard question to answer because I'm really just going by my own hypothesis. I have no evidence to support what I think. I personally do. The reason that I do is because I am not sure that he expected even to kill 4 people that night. I think someone got in his way. And I think, I'm not sure who it is, but I think someone or some people got in his way. And I think he would have eliminated other threats that he saw in his way. So I'm glad that she's alive, and I'm glad that she's safe, but I do think that would have been a very viable risk to her.
Wow, scary. Next person gets the Name of the Day award, Angela Bobana. And Tracy, I'm going to throw this one back to you. We've heard now a lot about this visual snow. And she writes, visual snow, light flashes, and tinnitus are a real syndrome associated with migraines and sometimes with head injury or post-infection. It can be debilitating, but in most people, it becomes background noise in daily activities. It is difficult to sleep with visual snow and tinnitus without medication. I do know some people with tinnitus, the ringing in your ears. Visual snow is what a young Bryan Kohberger, age 14 to 17, allegedly wrote about in online posts. I'm curious, Tracy, if you had a chance to read any of those posts and what you made of it, because some of them are kind of chilling. You know, he talks about not knowing himself, that he's basically numb to the world, that he's an empty soul. What did you make of that if you saw those comments?
Yes, I read those. I guess what really like struck out the most to me was him talking about how he was just, I think, completely devoid of emotion. Maybe I got that wrong, but there was a lot of reference to that. And so I guess my question is was he diagnosed with something prior to this? And was he feeling the way he was feeling because of medication that he was or wasn't on? But I want to be very careful, and I'll be very transparent. I have diagnosed PTSD because of things I did when I served in Afghanistan. That's normal. I have diagnosed depression. I take medication for those things. And just because you are suffering from visual snow or tinnitus or any of those kinds of things does not make you a killer. And so I always try to really separate those two, especially when we get into discussions like this, because one doesn't precipitate the other necessarily. I do think his writings were a way for him, I think, in a way to kind of cry for help. Now, when we put the pieces of the puzzle together, yeah, we see that. But again, just one thing on its own doesn't necessarily kind of indicate that this was the person he was.
And now is a good time to thank Tracy for sharing that, and thank Tracy for her service to the nation. And that is a reminder again of what people who do serve the nation deal with. A mutual friend of ours, and he's very public about it, who's a former CIA officer, Mark Pomeropoulos, is diagnosed with Havana syndrome. I've had him on the show to talk about it. These people are real heroes, protecting the nation and then suffering in return. So we hope you are doing well, Tracy. This next question comes from, this is the worst name of the day, Must Be Crazy. And this one, Tara, I will send to you. I don't understand how a sheath with his fingerprint on it in a house he had no business being in could be so easily argued away. That's insane. Yes, we do know where the DNA they've spoken of was. On the fastener of the sheath, the print was found. I think this person is basically asking a question that I've asked, which is, why is touch DNA potentially, I mean, I know blood is much stronger, but how can they just toss the touch DNA away from the button on the sheath?
Well, I don't know that you can just toss it away, but there's certainly in touch DNA, there are some weaknesses. And like you said, it's not as strong of an evidence as, DNA evidence is. But we're going to have to wait and hear, what more is out there, whether he knew anybody in the house, whether he had any association with anyone who's been to the house. There are a lot of, I think, possibilities there, and we're going to have to wait and see. To us, I think, to the public, as we're kind of listening and reading what we have been, that's been kind of out there in the press, it seems a little bit out and, in left field. And I understand the surprise and kind of the skepticism about, arguing this piece of evidence away. But they're going to have to put on evidence. And by they, I mean the state is going to have to put on evidence linking that up and explaining how it got there and why it got there. And the defense, I'm sure, is going to point out things like, well, nobody saw it there. Nobody saw him put it there or drop it there. And so there are gaps, right? And I think there's always the possibility that they could, bring up, this sheath and say he maybe lost it weeks ago or a month ago. I mean, who knows? There's all sorts of possibilities out there. And so I think it would be a mistake to just dismiss that outright without hearing what else happened and what the circumstances really are.
And Tara, this is kind of unintentionally a follow-up question to the last commenter from a different person named Shannon Elam. She writes, if detectives located traces of victims' blood or other DNA inside Kohberger's car, would it help make this a slam dunk case? Is there such thing? This came up yesterday. Is there such thing as a slam dunk case? Does blood in the car seal the deal?
There is no such thing as a slam dunk case. And I think Tracy's example earlier, where she was talking about going into grand jury, is a perfect example of that. There is no slam dunk case. I've never seen a slam dunk case. I've certainly had cases that I thought were really strong, and we went into court and we went before a jury and we had a not guilty. And I've had cases that I was like, wow, there's some holes here, but we think we can prove it. And they came back with a guilty verdict. So no such thing as a slam dunk. Every piece of evidence is helpful for the state in building that case against Kohberger. So yes, if there was DNA in the car, that would be helpful, but that doesn't make it a slam dunk case. There's still why and how did that DNA get there and under what circumstances. Now, if he came out and he made a statement or said something along the lines of, I never knew them, I've never been around them, and certainly, that piece of evidence is really helpful to rebut that claim, and certainly doesn't reflect well as part of his, credibility, especially before a jury. So perhaps it would be helpful, yes.
Next comment comes from a friend of the show, Chico's Mummy. Tracy, I'm going to send this to you. This is a very general question, as you'll see, or a comment. I keep seeing the term thrill kill. Not sure if it's the same thing, but evidence is emerging of a prevalence of one-and-done killers, and it's coming from the solving of historical cold cases through DNA advancements. What's emerging is that a huge number were carried out by men who never killed again. They just wanted to experience what it was like. There's a podcast, which we'll give a shout out to, called Unraveled, that I've never heard of, that's done a whole season on this, really worth a listen, which I'll check out. Whether this is true or not about, a bigger number of men experimenting with thrill kills and one and done, my question to you is, what is going on with society? I mean, we hear about these mass shootings, this quadruple homicide. I've read that people are fearful now that we're going to get copycat actors. What What is going on, and can anything be done? And if you have a good answer, you should be president next.
There was an article, I cannot remember if it was in the Washington Post or the New York Times a couple years ago. And it was after the shooting at Parkland with Nicholas Cruz, I believe. And it was an article that was called "Our Boys Are Not All Right." And it was all about how we had forced young boys, to stifle emotion. And so that when they have emotion and are not stifling it anymore, it doesn't come out in the right and correct and proper ways. Now, that is not to say that every boy then, is going to go ahead and commit and act like this. But I just found that article to be really interesting because obviously as a female, I never had looked at it from that perspective, right? Like emoting, having emotions, having feelings, that's a very feminine thing. So it's never really been something that I was told to shy away from, right? And so I just found that to be a very interesting thing. Now, as a society, I mean, I don't have an answer to your question, though, therefore I will never be president. But one of the things that I just do want to say, and I know this might not seem like it goes with this, but if anything comes out of this case, what I really hope is we are seeing this increase, right, in violence and spree kills and those kinds of things. One of the things that the University of Idaho did that was really incredible, this was early on, they had said that they were going to start sort of this like education program for students about just common sense safety tips, like locking your doors, those not being on your cell phone all the time. And I think we forget that sometimes we have to go down to that kind of micro level and really educate our college freshmen. And I thought that was really great that the University of Idaho was doing that. And I would like to see more schools do something like that in response to this.
This next comment, Mark 8337, Tara, this is right in your wheelhouse. If Kohberger did it, hopefully it won't go to trial. But if you're the suspect and his court-appointed attorneys, you need to get all the discovery and as much of your own investigation results in before really being able to make an assessment. I would think there will be many surprises to come to light during the entire process, and so much will be traumatic, most likely to different groups of people and individuals. I expect all this will be a big part of the 2023 news cycle. I know you don't do criminal defense, but do you expect surprises and twists and turns? And I mean, I know this is really putting you on the spot, but possibly an example of something like that?
Oh, the trials are unpredictable, and I'm sure Tracy has seen her fair share as well. There's always some aspect of unpredictability in it. And we, at this point in time, we are at a disadvantage. We don't have all the information that law enforcement has or that the defense is starting to see. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot that comes out. One of the questions is really why, why did this happen? If he did commit it, why did he commit it? And I think that is going to be a question that the state is really going to have to work on answering, because if you're sitting in the jury, you're going to have that, why should I believe that this person who, doesn't have, for instance, a criminal history or, may not have known these people, why would he even do this, right? And so I think there is going to be some surprising details and facts that do come out. I don't know that I can give you anything that's on par with what could come out in this case, but, I've had all sorts of crazy things that happen in trial. Some, as much as you prepare witnesses, for instance, sometimes your witness will come out with a piece of information that you've never heard before. I once had a case where I had my star witness who admitted on the stand, and it was, like a grand theft of a vehicle, but admitted on the stand that, he was taking drugs at the time. And, during this period of time when the car was stolen. And I was just like, what is that? Why didn't we talk about that before? Why is this just coming out now? And you just, you have to roll with it and figure out a plan of what are you going to do and how am I going to address this? And that's a very minor example, but yes. And especially in a case like this, you're going to have a lot of moving parts. I mean, I would expect that both sides, obviously the state side will, but that the defense will also have expert witnesses as well. So there's going to be likely a battle of the experts, maybe when it comes to cell tower data or the reliability of, fingerprints or all of those things. So in that process too, I'm sure that we're going to hear some surprising statistics and evidence from there.
Final question, and then we'll get, since we've got a lawyer on the panel, we'll get closing arguments. How about that? This one is for you, Tracy. It comes from Cheryl B. We had the inimitable Sergeant Chris Anderson on the show yesterday. He is well known from the TV show First 48. I believe he's had 400 or 500 homicide cases in his career. And on the show, he said, no one may ever know the truth of what was behind Bryan's urges or why he did this. Is that a real possibility that we just never fully understand why someone committed such a heinous crime, Tracy?
100%. And I agree with him. I've said that before. And I think to Tara's point, that is, in my opinion, the biggest mountain that the prosecution has to climb, quite frankly, is the why, right? Because, all of this stuff is great. But if you don't have a motive, then it's going to be difficult. And so I think also the public wants that. I think it's really, really scary. Right, for the public to think that someone would go on a rampage like this for absolutely no reason whatsoever. I think that's a psychologically really difficult thing to address. And I think that's why sometimes, when you look at murders of prostitutes or drug dealers and things like that, a lot of times society doesn't have a lot of empathy for that, because there's this idea, okay, well, I don't do that, so this won't happen to me. And that's obviously very, very wrong. But a lot of times those crimes don't get the attention that they deserve because of that. And I think in a case like this, we want to think, oh, well, this wouldn't happen to us because we weren't doing that. But that reason hasn't emerged yet. And that, I think, is the thing that scares everyone.
Tara Malik is now one of the best friends of the show. She did me a huge favor coming on last minute. Not only that, she's an Idaho licensed attorney practicing in state and federal court in business and commercial litigation. She has experience in both civil and criminal law. Previously, she worked as a Kootenai County deputy prosecutor, a special assistant United States attorney, and as an assistant United States attorney at the United States Attorney's Office in Boise, and is now the chief litigator at Smith and Malik, as well as co-owner. And if you listen to her today, you want to reach out to her. If you live anywhere west of the Mississippi, you want her representing you. Tara, thanks so much for doing this. And final thoughts. And do you think it's going to be a quiet period now, a big lull ahead, or is this just too wild a case where it will be back in the news sooner than we think?
Well, first, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and answer the questions that I can, and certainly to meet Tracy as well. In regards to your question about whether we can expect a lull, I don't think so. I think, we're going to see a lot of movement going forward here. Perhaps not between now and the preliminary hearing, but after the preliminary hearing occurs, I would expect that we're going to see some significant motion practice. Certain things in these types of cases that you normally would see would be motions to suppress certain evidence because of allegations that it was correct or, collected in the wrong way or in violation of someone's rights. We're going to have to kind of keep our eye out on that, but it would not surprise me if we saw some more action in the coming months here.
Tracy Walder has done it all at a young age, both a former CIA officer, a special agent at the FBI. She's now a professor of criminal justice at Texas Christian University and the author, you better go out and buy it, of The Unexpected Spy. Tracy, what are you looking for moving forward?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And Tara, you're absolutely incredible. I'd want you defending me in a case any day. I think moving forward, I think what we really want to see is some closure, I think, for the families. And I'm not sure that they're going to get closure until, the date of a trial itself or when he pleads guilty. But the ability for these families to feel like the justice system is moving and is doing what it should be doing. I think that that's going to go a long way. It's never going to bring their children, their sisters, aunts back. But I do think it's going to go a bit of a way in terms of helping them heal.
When I play tennis, which I don't do often because I have a horrible knee, and they're better than me, I play better. And you guys have made me smarter because you're both super smart. So thank you very much. A quick programming note. We are also covering this horrible story out of Cohasset, Massachusetts, about this missing mother of 3. We've had some really important conversations about domestic violence, but more people are watching this stuff than that. So make sure you're paying attention to Anna Walsh. Our prayers are with her and her family. Don't you worry. We'll be back soon enough with another episode of Surviving the Survivor. Love you, America.